welcome to this new video series on how to make your very own Tilly Tippy Toes. She's been a long time coming, but finally she's here. So sit back and enjoy all the videos on how to produce this lovely looking little dolly. And so in this tutorial, my lovelies, I'll be showing you how to make Tilly Tippy Toes body, and I'll be showing you the straight arm and straight leg version, along with the posable, bendable arms and bendable leg version. So here's our fat quarter of fabric. Make sure that you iron it out first before you start laying your pattern pieces onto it. So we've got a selvage running down here, and there's the other edge. What you need to do is just need to fold it over like so, lengthways, so that you've got just a little piece of the selvage still showing on that side there. And this is where we're going to draw on our two leg shapes and our two arm shapes. So I've drawn around my pattern pieces, and I've used an iron off marker pen, and we sell these in our online shop. They come in packs of 2. And they're great because you can mark it with a really good strong line, and then you can iron it off and it disappears completely. Okay, so two legs drawn on, 2 arms drawn on. So now I'm just going to separate that from the main piece of fabric. Now, a great little resource to use is this open toe machine foot, and as you can see, it's got a very big gap in the middle there. So when you're sewing around your pattern piece and the needle is punching down through the middle, as you're going, you can still see your line. It's not hidden by the foot, which is absolutely great. So you can sew with precision, and you can make sure that your needle punches straight into the line on each stitch as you do. So yeah, so that's an open toe foot. It's available, I would say, for most machines. So yeah, just Google it and I'm sure you'll find one for yours. Okay, so I'm going to go and sew around all my shapes and I'll be back. So I've used a 2.5 machine stitch, and I've sewn nice and precisely on the line using my open toe foot. So the next thing I'm going to do is separate all my pieces. And then with my arms, where that opening is, that's the stuffing opening, I'm just going to snip a straight line just beyond there. Same on that one. And where my leg opening is, which is right at the top here on the legs, I'm going to snip along that line. Now make sure when you do your machine stitch line that you go backwards and forwards at that point there, so that just reinforces that stitch line, and the same here, backwards and forwards there, backwards and forwards there. Okay, so now I'm going to pink the edges. And I'll continue to do that with the other 3 pieces. So all my edges are all pinked nicely on my legs and my arms, and I'm now going to go and iron each piece, and that will remove the pen mark because it's an iron off pen mark. And just like that, all my pen marks have disappeared. So now we're going to turn each piece. So on the leg, just poke through the foot, take your hemostats, lock in place, and just feed through to the top of the leg and pull it through. and arms. So take the hand of the arm, fold that through, clamp on, lock, and feed that up through. Turn that shoulder bit out as well. Okay, so now I'm going to use my dotting tool. I'm going to use that ball end there. I'm going to run it through all the seams, and this just helps to take that ridge out of the seam. When you're working on the leg, just coming around the foot here, just pay particular attention to that little area there, which is the ankle. So you need to really sort of push that out. It's only a small little section of the fabric, but just give it a nice little push out, and then when you come to stuff it, that ankle will pop out quite nicely. Same applies to the thumb on the hand. So that's turned, and I will continue to do the other 3 pieces. Okay, so they've all been turned, and I've used the dotting tool to push out the ridges on the seams. So the next thing for me to do is to go and iron them all nice and flat. Okay, so nicely ironed. In your pattern or your kit, you are going to get 2 different types of pattern pieces. You're going to get the bendable, posable arms and legs, and you're also going to get the straight legs. Well, this is the bendable ones. You can see they've got a slight indent in the knee area there and a slight indent in the elbow area. So that's the bendable, posable ones. And then these are the straight ones. So you can see the legs are much more straighter and haven't got that indent, and the arms are more straighter and haven't got that indent. Okay, so those are the pattern pieces that you get in your kit. Okay, so moving on, the next thing for us to do is to turn the top over, top of the legs over. So what we need to do is, following your pattern piece, take your iron off pen and just mark out that seam allowance that's shown in the pattern book. And you do that on the front and the back of the leg. Now it's really important to follow that seam allowance as shown in the pattern book, because this will give you the right placement for the legs when we attach it to the body. So I'm drawing along there, and then I am going to turn that top opening inside, and I follow the lines that I've just marked down. So that's the side edge. I'm just going to pop a pin in there, and the other inner side on the seam line. So a pin goes in there, turn it over and feed it in, making sure that it's turning down to where that red pen line is. Pop in another pin, turn it over this side, check check that it's on that seam line that you've drawn on, and pop in another pin. Okay, so once that's pinned in place, you'll be able to see that that top edge should have that pen mark on, and that is the correct placement for the turning in of the top of the leg. And then once you've done that, you can take some contrasting thread and you can run a tacking stitch through there, and that's just going to hold that in place as you stuff. Okay, so now I've tacked, and you can see that my red line is directly on the fold of that seam. So I'm going to repeat for my other two sets of legs, and then once I've done that, I can then go and iron that again, so that gives a nice crisp edge to the top opening there of the legs. Tops have been nicely ironed flat, and the pen mark has now been removed, so we're now ready to stuff. Just wait for Willow to stop coughing. Okay, so we're going to stuff the straight legs. I'm going to show you how to do that one first. So take your hemostats and your stuffing. We're going to take it right down to the foot. And into the foot. It needs to be stuffed really firm. She's quite a solid little dolly, and the weights of the stuffing for the arms and legs are written in your pattern book. So I'm just coming into that little ankle now, so past the small area, and then I'm poking that stuff in. Actually, I need a bit more in that bit. Poking that stuff in into that little ankle area. Get that pushed out. You can start overlapping as you go, so don't push the stuff in right the way down, just keep it overlapping so you can still see I've still got it hanging out the top here, and then I'm just grabbing some more and overlapping that in, and that helps to take out any lumps and bumps. If you push the stuffing down as a complete block, then that's when you end up with lumpy limbs. So just layer the stuffing in, rolling up the leg as you go. And then as we're getting to the top, I'm just going to roll that out, because that's obviously got tucked back under. Now it's really firm in the majority of the leg, but then as it gets to this top bit here, it gets lighter. It's a lot softer up here. So I'm just going to have a little feel. A little bit more. Yeah, that's good. So she's got a very firm leg. The ankle's got a nice protrusion there. Nice shapely leg, nice and firm until it gets to about 3 centimetres from the top, and then it gets really soft. So you don't want it to be too hard up the top there, and you can see it's roughly about 1 centimetre down from the top. Then I'm going to close that top seam together, grab one of my pins, and pop that in to hold in place. Okay, so I will repeat for the other straight leg. Both of the straight legs are now done, so now it's on to the bendable legs. So, same as before, we're going to stuff the foot through to the ankle, but this time we're only going up to the indentation there for where the knee area is. Into the ankle, push that protrusion of the ankle out. Okay, so I'm taking it just up to where that indentation is on the knee. I can probably just fit a tiny weeny little bit more in there. That's looking good. So there's a bit of a gap, which is what you need. Just make sure that all the stuffing has gone past that area there where we're going to do a seam. So there's no stuffing underneath that little section there. Okay, so I'm happy with the stuffing in there. So next job is to take my air erasable marker pen. I'm not using my iron off pen, I'm going to use my air erasable one for this. And then where the leg indents on the inside edge and the outside edge, I am just going to place a line through there. Just follow your pattern, it's shown on your pattern. And the same for this side. And then I'm going to take a couple of pins And I'm going to hold that in place. And then using my zipper foot on my sewing machine, I'm going to use the left hand edge of the zipper foot so that the needle is going to pierce down on that outside edge, and then I can use that comfortably to sew through this marked line. If you've got your needle poking that side, you're not going to, the stuffing area is not going to interfere with it. So I do recommend using a zipper foot to do that. And the stitch length that I'm going to be using is about a size 2. So I'm also going to make sure that I've got a long tail from this end, from the start end, and a long tail from the finish end as well. Okay, so I've sewn through there. Let's take my pins out. And I've got a long tail at the start, and I've got a long tail at the finish. So the next thing to do is just fasten those tails off. So just do a couple of little stitches just on the side back there of that leg. And then sink that tail back into the leg and give it a snip. I shall repeat that for the other 3 tails. Okay, so all 4 seams, all 4 tails are now sewn in. So I'm going to take my doll needle, and because the stuffing's lower compared to where the stitch line is, I'm just going to use my needle just to pull up that stuffing to meet where that stitch line is. Do that on both sides. And do it on the front and the back of the leg. So just pulling it up so that it meets the sewn line. And next we are going to stuff the top of the leg, similar manner to how we stuff the top of the leg for the straight legs. Take it right down to that bottom edge. And same as before, you want it stuffed quite firmly on the top half of the leg. And then it gets softer as it goes up towards the top. And then pop in a pin to close that off. So that's both the tops of the legs stuffed on the bendable legs. And then finally, for the tops of the legs, we are just going to sew that top opening closed. So fasten on my thread on that outside edge, and then keeping the 2 edges together, I'm just going to be doing a simple slip stitch, closing the 2 layers together. And we'll do that all the way along the top of the leg. coming to the end. Just fasten that off. 3 little stitches. And then sink the tail back into the leg. And give that a snip. Just snip off that start tail. And then take your doll needle again. This time you're going to manipulate that stuff in from the top of the leg down to that stitch line on both sides. Okay, so there you have one bendable leg. So I'm going to continue to close the top of that one and the straight legs and then remove all the tacking stitches. So that's the legs done, finished. So we've got the straight ones and we've got the bendable ones. So now on to stuffing and finishing the arms. Okay, so we're going to do the straight arms first and then we'll move on to the bendable ones. Okay, so you want small pieces to start with because that's going through that little tiny wrist into the hand. Down through that little wrist, into the bottom of the hand and push that out so that you get that nice shape. Another small little bit. Down through the wrist, and this bit you'll be able to turn into that thumb, so push it into that thumb, get that thumb shape nicely. Another small bit, 'cause now we're going into the wrist. And now just keep working along. Now you can start overlapping. And then when you've got up to past the sort of elbow area, you can then turn it and start with the bit that you've got coming hanging out at the top there, start stuffing the top of the arm, which is like this shoulder section. And then just start poking all the rest of it back in to the top section of the arm. Okay, so you want it nice and firm all the way through, including up to that top section there where the shoulder is. And then when you've got enough in, you can just pin that opening closed. And repeat for the other arm. So that's those two arms stuffed and pinned in at the top edge. So now it's on to the bendable arms. And again, like the legs, you've got an indentation just above the elbow. So we are going to stuff from the hand up to that point there. We're taking this down to just about where the elbow is. Which is around about where that little indentation is. I'm just going to pop a bit more in. I'm going to push it down to make sure that it's away from where I'm going to sew. So I don't want any of the stuffing under that section there. So let's push it down a bit more. That looks good. And I'm going to repeat for that other arm. So that's the stuffing on the second arm done. Just pushing it down, making sure that it's below where I'm going to sew. And then same as we did for the legs. We're going to take our air erasable marker pen and we're going to mark in where we're going to sew. So again, use your pattern as a guide. And then take 2 pins on each arm. To hold that in place. And then using your zipper foot again, go and sew that seam using a stitch length number 2, leaving a tail at that end and that end. Okay, so I've sewn along there, take my pins out. And now I'm going to sew my tails. And then take your doll needle and just bring that stuffing up to meet that stitch line on the front and on the back. And then we are going to finish stuffing the top of that arm. So take it down, take the first piece of stuffing down to the stitch line, get it into those corners, and then start working in some more. and then turn it and start working into the top of the arm. Okay, and then close that top edge with a pin. So both those bendable arms are done, and I've pinned them in at the top. So the next thing to do is to close the opening. I tend to work with my pin out. I find it easier to see. You might need to leave your pin in, and that's entirely up to you. Just going to fasten on. And then to close this gap, I am going to do a mattress stitch. But you may find it easier just to do a slip stitch. Either way is absolutely fine, but the mattress stitch will just make it a little bit more invisible. So that's the stitch that I'm going to do here. So I'm taking up a piece of the fabric from one side, just a small little stitch, and then going down parallel to the fabric underneath. Below, taking a little stitch there, coming up parallel, taking a stitch from above, and then down parallel, taking a small stitch, and then going parallel up, taking a stitch from above, and when you get to the end of the opening, just pull on your stitches, and that will close that all the way through. And then you have that nice, tight, invisible mattress stitch. Then we're just going to fasten that off. And sink the tail. And give that a snip. So there you have a nicely closed opening, which is quite invisible, but like I say, if you prefer to do a slip stitch, then that's absolutely fine. So I'm going to repeat that for my other 3 limbs that I've got waiting. Okay, and then finally with the bendable arms, I'm just going to take my doll needle and just pull that stuffing down from the top of the arm down to the stitch line. Okay, so that's the arms done. So you've got your straight arms and your bendable arms. So now on to the body. So take your fabric, and that's the area there that we cut the arms and the legs out of. You need to open that up, and then you're left with that inner section there, and you need to draw the template, which it says back on it, but it's basically a rectangle. So draw that on. Make sure that you put on those 2 waistline marks, and then you're going to cut that out. So now we have a rectangle with 2 waistline marks. And what you need to do is you need to fold it over at those marks, and then take your template. Mine is just a working template, you'll have a proper template, and you need to fold your template over, lay it on the fabric so you can just still see some of the fabric at the bottom there. Take your iron off pen, your iron off marker pen, and then you need to put the marks, those inside marks, on the template, and that's where we're sewing up to. Take your template off, bring that mark up a bit for a seam allowance, and then you are going to sew along there, stop, backwards and forwards, and along there, backwards and forwards at the start point. So I've sewn along there, and I've sewn along there, and there's a gap in the middle. And I'm just going to take my scissors, and I'm just going to slice that open along that fold. And then I'm going to take that to my iron, and I'm going to iron that seam allowance out nice and flat, and then I'll have that opening in the middle there. So there it is, ironed nice and flat, turned over, so I've got that opening there. And now I'm going to machine stitch just along the edge of the top and of the bottom. It's just really basically to hold that seam allowance in place, so really close to the edge. Okay, so I've done a little top stitch all the way along there and all the way along there. Then I'm going to take my template back again, and there's the opening mark, which is that section there. I'm going to line that up, and then there's another little mark there outside of that. That's where the outside edge of the waist pattern is. So I'm just marking that in. And then I'm going to take another template, the same as before, and with the outside edge of this fabric uppermost, I'm going to lay that on top like so. And then I've taken my body pattern piece and I've laid it on the top, and I've matched the waist area, so you'll see a line on your pattern piece. Match that up with those little marks that you've just added there. Draw around the body template, and then you're going to sew right on top of the line all the way around the whole body using a 2.5 machine stitch. So I've sewn all the way around, and now I'm going to take my pinking shears and just snip away all the excess fabric. And now I'll take her to the iron and iron off all the marker pen marks. So all the pen marks have been ironed off, and now we're going to turn her the right side out. So you've got this lovely little opening here, and that's how we're going to get her the right way around. So I pop my finger through up her neck, up and through her neck I should say, and pull that through. And then down into the lower half of her body and pull that through. Okay, then I'm going to take my dotting tool and I'm going to run this through all the seam lines just to get rid of the ridge, the dip in the stitch line. So all the way through all the stitch line. Okay, so that's her smoothed out. I'm now going to go and give her a little iron. Okay, so moving on, I've got 2 bodies and 2 sets of legs, and I'm going to show you 2 different ways to attach the legs to the body. This one I'm going to show you using a slip stitch, and this one I'm going to show you using a mattress stitch. Okay, so I've got my body front and I've got the fronts of my legs. Make sure that the toes are pointing inwards. You don't want your doll's legs like that. Okay, so they go inwards. So there's the body front and the front of the legs. And I'm just going to turn that upside down like that. Bring that round. And I'm going to work on this leg first. So I'll just move this one here to the side, keep that in that position. And then take my sew-all thread, and it's double on the needle. I'm going to fasten it on to the lower edge of the doll body. So that's right on that corner there. Then take my leg and take my needle and come in through the outside corner of the doll's leg and bring it closed. Now you might want to put a pin in. I tend not to put a pin in, I just hold it in place. If you want to pop some pins in, then do go ahead and put your pins in now at this stage, but I much prefer just to hold it in place. And all I'm going to be doing is a slip stitch through the leg into the body. So through the leg and into the body. We're coming to the inside of the doll's leg. So at this point I am just going to do a few extra stitches here just to reinforce that edge. And then I'm ready to take my other leg because it's in the right position. Just pick that up. And I take my needle, make sure that it's coming out of the body and not the leg. And go in through the inside edge of the other leg. Hold it in place, a couple of stitches to get it going. And then I'm ready again to carry on with my slip stitch. So we're coming to the end now. and then when you're at that end, fasten off with 3 little stitches. And then just sink the tail back into the leg. Okay, so that's the first pair of legs, the bendable legs, sewn onto the body using a slip stitch. And then next we are going to sew these on using a mattress stitch. Okay, so again, line the body up with the legs. We're going to keep it this way round. We're not going to flip the leg over, we're going to keep the leg straight for the mattress stitch. I'm going to work on this leg first, so I'm going to move that one there. Okay, then I'm going to fasten my thread on to the outside corner on the body. Okay, so it's quite difficult to work with. You can't pin it, you have to sort of hold it there. So I'm doing 1 stitch in the body and 1 stitch in the leg, and they're parallel to each other. So I've got the thread coming out of my body, so I'm going to take 1 little stitch in the leg, next stitch is down into the body, I have to hold it up otherwise you won't be able to see it. And then into the leg, parallel stitch down into the body, parallel stitch going up into the leg, and then when I get to just before halfway, got all those mattress stitches running there, I'm just going to take my thread and I'm just going to pull them all closed. All nice and tight right up to that very first one that we did. So it's locked all those in place now. Once they become pulled, they become locked. And then I can continue taking a small stitch from the leg, then another one into the body. And I'm just going to continue to work that till the end of the leg. Okay, so we come to the end of the first leg. I'm just going to do some little stitches there just to reinforce the stitch line on that one. And now I'm ready to feed in the other leg. Just coming to the end of this leg now. Give it a little pull, make sure all the stitches are nice and taut. And then fasten off. And so that's that one done with a mattress stitch. So there's not a lot of difference between them. I would say that one looks slightly neater, but this one is definitely easier. Okay, so the choice is yours on how to do it. So before I stuff the bodies, I'm just going to go and run the iron along those edges there. So both are nicely ironed and ready to stuff. Okay, so using your hemostats, we're going to stuff the neck area first. And again, this needs to be nice and firm. And the weight for the stuffing is written in your pattern book. So up into the neck first. And then turn her upside down and start working the stuffing into the lower section of the body. And just go from side to side. Turn her up and start working on the shoulders and the lower section of the neck. Push it up into that neck. Into the shoulders. Push it into more of this neck section here. So from the back, run the hemostats right on the edge of the fabric. When you get there to the top end, you can push it up from there and into the shoulders. Okay. So stuffing done, she's nice and solid. Okay, so that's the two bodies stuffed, and now that just leaves me to sew up this opening here. So use your sewing thread, double on the needle, take it into that opening and just fasten it on. And to close this, we are going to do a mattress stitch. Just get rid of that tail end to start with so it doesn't get in my way. Okay, so it's working from the upper body down into the lower body. So my needle's coming out of the upper body, so I'm going to take a stitch into the lower body. And then the thread goes parallel up, and I'll take a stitch in the upper body and then down parallel in the lower body. And I'm going to keep working along like that, making sure that all the stitches are the same size and that each one is parallel to the one before. And just work along in that manner. So lower body, upper body, lower body, and I'm going to work about a third of that opening. Okay, so it's about a third done, and then I'm going to take my thread and I'm going to pull, and I'm going to pull all those stitches closed. You do need to make sure you're using a good thread because you don't want it snapping. We always use the Gutermann sewell thread. Okay, so that's locked those stitches in place. And then I will continue to work the rest of the opening. Okay, so we've now closed that opening. Just give it another pull. Take my thread to the outside edge, and I'm just going to fasten off with 3 little stitches. Just there. And then sink the tail. So that's the back closed. Nice consistent little mattress stitching. So I will continue now to do this one. Okay, so the last thing for us to do is to sew the arms onto the bodies. Right, so you are going to make sure your arms are in the correct position, the right one for the right side. First, you're going to mark out the positioning for the sewing of the arms. So I'm using my air erasable marker pen for this. So on the arm, where the arm is fitting on like this, we're going to draw in, it's approximately where the seam is, it's approximately 1/2 centimetre down. And then draw a semicircle. Okay, so you've got a little semicircle about 1/2 centimetre from the seam, and then that is going onto there. And then likewise on this, where you've got this shoulder protrusion, from the most pointy out part, 1/2 centimetre down, you are going to draw the same semicircle again. So this is a guide for our stitching line. Okay, so take your thread and fasten on to your body. So go just in the middle there, underneath that side seam, that marked pen mark, and just fasten on there. And then take your thread out to the bottom point of that semicircle and just do another 2 stitches just to hold that in place. So that thread is now ready to use for sewing on the arm. Then take your arm with your marked line, hold it on to the body, and use a doll needle to anchor it into the body there, and then use 3 pins into the arm just to hold that in place there as well. Okay, so you've got all your pins holding it in place, and then you're going to match the 2 semicircles that you drew on to your arms with a mattress stitch. So you've got your thread coming out of your body, so the next stitch is into the arm. And then the next stitch is into the body. And then into the arm, all the time following those 2 semicircles that you've drawn on to your body and your arm. So into the body, pull the thread, make it nice and tight, and into the arm, into the body. And as you're working along, just pull up on that stitch each time, and that just tightens it and it will lock it in place. So into the arm, and then into the body, and just work all the way round that semicircle. Okay, so coming round, so into the arm, into the body, sorry, and then into the arm, into the body. We're coming to the end of that semicircle now. So the last stitch needs to be in the body, and then just pull that really tight. Okay, then take your needle out, take your pins out, give it another pull, turn her over and turn her arm up the other way. Now those last few stitches that you've done will be a bit loose, so just take your needle and thread and pull that tight. Then while you've got that there tight, do your next stitch in the arm, continue along underneath the arm, so into the body, arm, body, and you're back where you started from at the first part of that semicircle on the back side there. Turn her up the other way and take that thread to the centre where that seam is, and we will fasten off there. Three little stitches, and you got it. Sink the tail. Okay, so that is one arm sewn on. I'm going to sew the other one on, and this time I'll do it slightly closer so you've got more of a better view of it. Okay, so here's the second arm, and a little bit closer for you. Also, I forgot to mention, if your shoulder isn't looking like it's got enough stuffing in it, just use your needle just to manipulate some more stuffing into that area. Okay, so you'll have to bear with me as I sew this because it's quite difficult for me to position the doll so you can actually see my stitches, but I'm sure you'll get a good idea. Okay, so I've got my semicircle drawn on there, and I've got my semicircle drawn on there. So I'm going to position the arm. I'm just going to make sure also that the top of her arm is slightly higher than the shoulder. So just check that out as well. So I'd say that's about a good position. And then I'm going to pop a doll needle in through her arm there just to keep her in place. And then 3 pins in the top of the arm just to hold that as well. Okay, so my needle is coming out from this side. I can see my semicircle on my arm, and if I pinch forward I can see my semicircle on my body. Okay. So thread is coming out the arm, so I need to go, thread is coming out the body, so I need to go into the arm. I'm going to have to keep moving it around so that I can work and so that you can see it at the same time. So into the arm, into the body, and into the arm. Without getting caught around the hand, or the other hand. If you use your nail just to push that backwards and forwards, you should be able to see the semicircles on each side. Just going to make sure it's all pulled in at the front whilst I'm working round on the back. Just going to check again the other side. That's looking good. Pop my needle into the body. And then remove my needle and my pins. Pull on that thread, make sure it's tight, lift the arm up. Pull on that thread because it's come loose, and then continue with that mattress stitch under the arm. Okay, now when we get to that outside edge, one more stitch, I then went back and fastened off there. But what you can also actually do is at this point, have a look at it, and if you're not happy with how it's laying, because you're back to the beginning, you could then go back and correct it if you feel that it's not sitting or looking good, and then fasten it off there. So here they are, two completed bodies, one with straight arms and legs and one with the posable arms and legs. Now the good thing about the posables is you can mix and match them. So you might want to have straight arms with bendable legs, or you might want to have bendable arms with straight legs. So you can mix and match to however you would like your dolly to look. Okay, so in the next video I will be showing you how to paint her face, ready for us to construct her head. So thank you for watching, my lovelies, and I'll catch up with you again soon. See you later. Bye.